Hello everyone, today I'm going to make a video on how I would start a brand new project. I've got FDOT's sample project up right here, and there's really nothing in this project. So what I want to do first is navigate over to the project, your normal directory, and the first thing that you'll probably receive from a surveyor is this SURVRD01 file. So when you get that from the surveyor, you want to obviously first create your project using the 0 work set template, and then go ahead and open up this SURVRD file and see what we got. So I imagine what's going to happen is the file may be created in an older version, which is the case here. So this is a 10.10 file right here, and I'm using 10.12. So I want to upgrade this file. And this could happen on any number of files. I mean, it could happen as you're working on a project. There's different versions of ORD that are going to get installed throughout the life of the project. So if you do come across this, it's usually a good idea to go ahead and update the file. Always check with the head roadway designer, your CAD manager, or whoever to make sure that everyone knows which version of ORD you'll be using on that project going forward, so that you can know if you should upgrade the file or not. So once we get into this file, there's a couple things that you typically want to do after you update a file to the latest version. And we'll get to that here. So you want to make sure that you have your Explorer open, and you're going to go to Open Road Standards, and you're just going to right click this SURVRD, and we want to update the standards from the DGen lib. So what this is doing is, in this file, there are a bunch of standards, feature definitions, feature symbologies, all of this stuff that were set when this file was first created in 10.10. Changes could have been made to those feature definitions. Feature definitions could have been added. There could be a bunch of new things that have been added since we got to 10.12. So what we want to do is update this file to all of those new standards. And by right-clicking and doing update standards from DGen lib, we're able to do that. And it could take a few seconds here, depending on how old the file is, for everything to finish processing. And once you're finished processing that, you'll have all the new feature definitions and feature symbologies. Everything is loaded in the file. You want to do one more thing before you're done. You want to come up here and make sure you're in the Home tab. I've got this attributes thing pinned to all of my tabs, but if you go to Home, that's where it usually is. If you go to this drop down right here, this is your element templates drop down. We want to go down to Manage, and we'll just go right here, right click. We're going to go click on it, Utilities, and update templates from the library. So this is just updating all of the element templates to use all of the new, that are using all the new feature definitions and feature symbologies that we've added to the file. So once that's finished, all of these have been updated as well. And since this is a survey file, those two operations could take a couple minutes, so just be patient, let them finish. Typically, normal files, other files won't take nearly as long. So just keep that in mind. It doesn't usually take that long, but it looks like this SURVRD file did take some time. So really what we're looking at in the SURVRD file is the entire delivered survey in a 3D file. So this file should be a 3D file. I guess it doesn't say up here for sure, but this is definitely going to be a 3D file, because if you attempt to rotate it, you can see all the lines are 3D break lines essentially. And so this file is great for what it is, but it makes it a little bit difficult to manipulate it for plan production purposes. So we'll get into some steps about how to start pulling this file apart a little bit and creating some 2D files that we can use for our plan production purposes, for referencing purposes and stuff like that. So you can see we've got all the existing topography, existing pavement markings, but we've also got stuff like existing utilities in here. There should be some existing drainage in here. You can see there's some drainage elements here. So typically we like to split all of those things into different files. So existing topography like the pavement and pavement markings, curb, things of that nature will go into a TOPORD01 file. Utilities such as this overhead electric line or this buried sanitary line, buried non-potable water line, those are going to all go into a UTEX RD01 file. And then our drainage will go into a DREX RD01 file. And I don't see any right-of-way in here. Sometimes you might get a survey file with right-of-way, but typically that file should be delivered separately. That's going to go into an RWDTRD01 file, and it will go in the roadway folder. So that should be a delivered file from your surveyor as well. So next, what we're going to do is start creating some of those files that we need. So we're going to go to the FDOT Create File tool, and we're going to create a file. And the drop down, you want to find your discipline here. So I want to find the survey discipline. And it pops up first with survey design files. There's survey design and survey sheet. So we'll stick with survey design files. So the first thing I want to do is create my TOPORD01 file. So you can see here, if I click this, this is the topography existing. It's going to create a TOPORD file with an 01 sequence because it doesn't have, there isn't one sitting in the folder currently. And before I do that, I don't really know what the county or coordinate system of this file is. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. And we can go ahead and look at our miscellaneous tools and set coordinate system. Actually, I don't want to set. I want to actually go and look at what the coordinate system is. So coordinate system. So if I start typing coordinate up in the search bar, I want to look at the geographic coordinate system. And this can tell me it's North Florida. I don't specifically remember which county this is, but I know that if I go to create file again, I believe Leon County, that's probably what this is Leon. We'll switch this over to North Florida. So when I'm creating that TOPORD file, I want it to be on the same coordinate system as my SURVRD file so that everything will end up lining up properly. And just kind of rounding out the rest of this window here, it's automatically going to output this to the survey folder, and it automatically knows to go and load the FDOT ORD2D seed file. So if you ever wanted to change that, you could browse. You could browse the seed file and find a different seed file if you browse. You've got to kind of know where to go. It's not really important right now for that, but you could also browse here and choose a different folder to put it in. But it's typically a good idea to follow this so that your files remain QC compliant. So let's go ahead and create that file, and it will open TOPORD01. Now that I'm in my TOPORD and everything is loaded, I can go ahead and close this. And so I shouldn't see anything in this file, obviously, because it's brand new. The first thing we want to do is we want to stay in this FDOT toolbar, and we want to attach survey reference. So that brings up this neat little tool. And so the first thing you want to do is browse and grab your SURVRD file. And you can see, just to note, that there is a SURVRD back file in here that is automatically created whenever you update a file from a previous version to a new version. Typically, I just go ahead and delete that because I don't usually look back and ever need to downgrade, and there is a process to downgrade files anyway. So eventually we'll just delete that. I usually just delete those as I go. So we'll go ahead and use this file. And what this does is it's going to kind of split that file into its different components using level filters. So FDOT has level filters set up that know, like, pavement asphalt EP needs to be in the topo file, for example. So we're going to turn off all of these files, and I just want to attach it using the topo filter. So you can see I've got in my references here, I'll turn off. For some reason it's still highlighted. Okay, get it unhighlighted. So what it's done is brought in all the levels that it thinks should be on topo. It's like we've got all these points in here. I mean, we can bring those in but it's not like the biggest deal to bring those in. Usually there's not this many points all sitting out in the middle of nowhere. And really, since this is going to be more of a plan production file, I might choose to just turn these off. Some of these miscellaneous triangles and points just sitting out here in the middle of nowhere. So maybe clean some of this stuff up. Just turning off levels. So, sorry, I might have done that really fast. If I right click and hold, you can choose level off, and that will kind of give you a tool of like picking and choosing things that you want to turn off. So if I just click this, it turns everything on that level off. So it looks like there's some stuff out here too. So one thing we might want to do real quick is go home. Do we have to go home? Nope, it's right here. This fence tool's plenty of places, but we want to place a fence. And there's several different options for placing a fence. You can do a block, a shape, a circle, an element. We're just going to stick with block for now. And I just want to clip. So if I draw this block around the topo here, and I go into here, and I click my reference, I want to use this little scissors guy and clip the reference. And we're just using the active fence. You can use an element. If you drew an element out there, you could use that as well, but we're just using the active fence. And I'm just going to clip it. And so you can see like the boundary of it has changed. So it's not picking up anything that was way out here. I tried to like restrict what's being shown here. And so ultimately what we need to do is just, I want all of that line work in this file in a 2D file. So I'm going to right click and I want to merge into master. And then you just come out here and data point. You have selected one reference to merge. Yes. Okay. And it will merge everything in. And now all of these lines are live and 2D in this file. So we're in a 2D view. So if I rotate, everything is flat, which is really handy. So now I've got my topo RD01 created. The next thing I want to do is go to my create file. And we'll create our drainage existing next. Make sure everything's still set up. We're creating drainage existing. It's going in the survey. And we'll just go ahead and create open file. So now we're here in the drainage existing. Going to do the pretty much similar thing that we did in the topo. Attach survey reference. Keeps showing up in the other screen for some reason. Browse here. Grab our SURVRD. This time we want to single out the drainage existing reference. Go ahead and attach that. Again, we've got this giant view, which I'm not really sure why this view is so large, but if you hit zoom fit view here, it'll zoom to the extents of everything. And looks like we've got everything that we need. What are these little dots? I mean, these little dots we could probably turn off as well. So I'm just going to right click and hold, level off, and turn those off. And then I'll do the same thing with my fence. And we'll clip the reference just so we make sure we're not picking up anything that's way outside the limits of the survey. And looks like maybe there's some other little things in here. I think these are okay. I'm not too worried about that. We'll just leave those guys there. And then we're just going to right click, merge into master, data point, and hit OK. And now we've got all that line work in our drainage existing. So pretty simple there. Last one we need to do here now is the utilities existing. So we'll just go ahead and create another file. Do the utex file, create open. All right, here we are in our utex RD01. Go ahead and attach survey reference. And I'm going to browse, grab the SURVRD, turn all of these off and do the utex this time. We're going to attach that. Processing complete. And then just grab the element selection so that it everything's in here and attached. So we can see everything that we need. Just to be safe, we'll do a little fence around here again, and we'll clip it. And then we can go ahead and merge that in. Okay. So now we have all of our 2D base files created. We've got drainage existing, topo RD01, and the utilities existing. So next, what we need to do is deal with the existing terrain model. So what I want to do is we're going to go back to the SURVRD file and take a look at that real quick. Now we're back here in the SURVRD file, and I just want to draw your attention to the existing terrain model that was delivered in the SURVRD file. So that is this right here. I guess it's showing we've got a boundary sitting here. So maybe let's turn DTM boundary off real quick. So we'll go into our level display and just come down. Let's turn that off because I really want to find something that says terrain model existing ground like that. And if you click on it, it'll give you the option to set it as an active terrain model. So that's the one we're looking for. But we don't want to really set it as an active terrain model because it doesn't need to be in this file. What I really want to do is export that terrain model. And there's a couple different ways you could export it. In the past, when we used Geopack, we'd use tins a lot. Now I would choose to use a land XML file. And since we've already selected the terrain, we don't need to select it again. So it's just asking us what the project name is. And you could go ahead and call this, whatever your project is. I don't know what this project is called. So we're just going to call this EX ground test, just for fun. Give it something. You don't necessarily need to give it a description, but you do want to make sure that you're exporting both, which means you're exporting the features and the triangles. So that's important. Let's go ahead and just click through the options, and then it's going to bring up where you want to save that file. And we need to go into here, and you can see that we've already been delivered an existing ground XML. We saw that when we first opened that SURVRD file. And typically you would definitely use that when you're going to set up your existing terrain model. But sometimes the surveyor doesn't give you that XML. I typically request it when I get survey from surveyors, but other times you just get this SURVRD and you have to export that terrain model yourself. So I just kind of wanted to show how you would do that. So all you would do is, you just give it a file name. So we can just call this, let's call what I call it, EX ground test. And we'll go ahead and save that. So now you've exported that terrain model into an XML, which you can then import that XML into any file that you need. So next thing we need to do is create our GDTMRD file. And I'm going to go over a slightly modified way that I just learned from some of the Bentley folks. It kind of makes it easier if in the future you were to receive updated survey. It makes it very easy for you to merge that new survey into the existing survey that you have without having to update active terrain models or do anything with that. So that's the method that I'll be going over here today. And the first thing that we need to do is go ahead and create file. And we're going to do GDTM. And I'm just going to call this 00 because the way this method kind of works is the first GDTM that I'm creating here isn't the one that I'm going to be attaching to all of my other files. So that's why I'm calling it 00 to kind of signify that this isn't the design or the one to be used for design. So we'll go ahead and create that. Now that we're in the GDTMRD01 file, we want to come over to our terrain tab and we want to create a terrain model from file. this over. And every time you do this, it always defaults to the last place that you were looking for a file. So that's why I keep having to switch files. We'll come into the survey, and I'm just going to use that one that was delivered, the existing ground XML. This is the test one that we created. We don't need to use that. That was just an example. So we'll go ahead and do that. This is going to bring up this dialog box right here. You can kind of look at this information up here. This is all going to be kind of default to either the terrain model or the file. What we really want to pay attention to is what feature definition we load this terrain on. And so typically when you are working with existing terrain models, so you're usually only going to see terrain, then you want to open up existing and use DTM existing. And we'll build the terrain from source and definition, but we only want to import the terrain. We don't want to import the features. All we're really concerned about is the terrain. And since we're setting our coordinate systems in each file properly, we shouldn't need to do anything else with the coordinate system. So if you go ahead and hit import, it'll import. Nothing will show up until you close this and then fit the view. And you should be able to see your terrain model in here. Okay. So that's the beginning. You can set this as the active terrain model, but we don't really need to do that in this case because again, like this file isn't one we're really going to use. So the next thing I'm going to do might be a little confusing at first, but just stick with me because what this is going to do for us is help us out in the long run if we ever need to update our terrain model in the future. Let's say our surveyor comes in and maybe we needed to survey a little bit further down this street. And so they sent us a new terrain model, whether it be just this little piece or an entirely new terrain model. We want to set ourselves up so that we don't ever have to go through all of our model files and reset an active terrain model again. And we would have to do that if we were to delete this terrain model and then load in a new one. ORD would see that new terrain model as a brand new element. And in every file, we'd have to go in there and reset the active terrain model and process all of our corridors so that it sees that new existing ground. We want to avoid doing that by creating a complex terrain model. So what we're going to do here is I want to go File, Save As, and I'm just going to call this one Dummy. Now that I'm in this file, I don't want this terrain model in here right now. I want to detach that, or I want to delete it, not detach it. And I want to actually attach that GDTMRD00 that we had. So I want that as a reference. And I want to come in here and adjust the properties. So I'm just hovering over the terrain model and clicking the first little box there. That's to get into the properties. And in order to change any of the properties for a reference terrain, you have to first turn on the override symbology, which gives you access to all of these. And I'm going to turn on the terrain model. So the way that I learned this from Bentley was to create what they called a delta terrain model. They basically offset this terrain 0 feet. And so you've got basically two terrains that are exactly the same that you're complexing together. My thought was, why do you need that big of a terrain to complex together if all you're really doing is creating a extra dummy terrain just because a complex terrain model requires two terrain models to form it? So what I thought about doing is just coming in here and I'm just going to go on like a miscellaneous, like miscellaneous 2 is pretty good. Doesn't really matter. And what I want to do is come to my drawing and I'm just going to do a smart line because what I ultimately want to do is make a shape. So I'm just going to come in here and make a shape around these triangles. And the reason I wanted to see the triangles is so that when I create this clipped terrain model, I'm creating it along the edge of triangles and I'm not making any weird points outside of the current triangles. So now that I've got that, maybe it's hard to see. Maybe you want to come in here And usually I have my transparency on. If you don't see transparency, you can right click up in this section and turn transparency on and set it to like 50 so that line shows up nice and clear for you. Next thing we want to do is come over to terrain. And in the create, I want to create a clipped terrain model. So I'll locate my reference element, which is the terrain model that I want to clip, and the clipping element. Then we'll right click. And just to be safe, I believe it's one of the options you click through, but you want to make sure that you're clipping external. So you're clipping everything outside of that shape. And we're going to call this, I put this on feature definition DTM temp. It seems like a good one. It doesn't really matter too much, but it's a blue level, so it will make it look a little bit different. So we'll just go ahead and call this EX ground dummy, just so we give it a name that we know that this is just some dummy terrain that we're creating. So I'm just going to click through all the options. There's the external. And we've got this little dummy terrain model, and you can see all the triangles exactly follow the triangles from the original terrain model. So now I've got two terrains that I can now complex together into one terrain. So the next thing we need to do is go into the FDOT toolbar, create file, and now I want to create my actual GDTMRD01. This is the one that we're officially going to use for a lot of our modeling. Now that we're in that file, let's go and attach three different things. I want to attach my original GDTM, my dummy GDTM, and the SURVRD file. Let's attach all of those. Fit view. And the first thing I want to do is go into that SURVRD file. And before I had turned off that DTM boundary EP level, but in this case, I want to use that. So I'm going to go right click in here on any level, it doesn't matter, and do all off, and then turn on DTM boundary. And again, maybe we want to do, let's set these to like a 50 transparency so they're a little bit lighter. And let's go ahead and create that complex terrain model. So I've got two terrain models that I want to use now. And I'm going to turn SURVRD off right now so we can make sure we see those terrain models. So we'll go to terrain, additional methods here in the create complex terrain model. And you can see on the left-hand side here, it automatically loads any of the terrains that are in the file, whether they're referenced or active. So the first one I'm going to add is the existing ground, and then I want to append my existing ground dummy to that. So it's basically just going to replace that little section with the exact same thing, essentially. And then we'll come down here and make sure we're on the right feature definition, terrain existing, and then DTM existing. And I'm just going to call this existing ground main and finish. So you can see what happens is it's creating this terrain model, but we've got a lot of triangles that are outside of the limits of our original terrain. And that's because it's using this edge method called sliver. We could do a few things to it. You could come in here, and if I turn on the triangles, you'll see that there's these giant triangles trying to connect across. And that's something we definitely don't want, because that wasn't surveyed and all of that stuff is just nonsense. So we'll go ahead and turn those off. You could come in here and change the max triangle length to something like 100. You can see how it tightens it up a little bit. But we don't really even need to do that. What we can do instead is, let's just do a Control Z here. And let's turn these off again. Okay, so now we have the original boundary. And for whatever reason, it's giving us a little more extended terrain model here. I'm not really sure why it's doing that, since we complexed this terrain model with this one. So I'm not entirely sure why it's doing that, but we can make sure that maybe that's some nonsense too. And we can go ahead and turn our SURVRD on again. And we've got this boundary in here. So what that allows us to do is come up into the edit section, and we want to add a feature to our terrain model. So if I select the terrain model and make sure the feature type I want to add is a boundary, I can go select that element. And this element needs to be a 3D element in the file. So I think one of the things that we need to convey to the surveyor is we need that boundary element for the terrain model. So I can go ahead and click that. And it's just saying reset when done, asking me what feature type. And now you can see my terrain model has snapped in using that boundary. So now we've got a complex terrain model. And if I wanted to go and click this, let's turn everything off so it's easier to click. So if I wanted to do anything with this, you could come in here and edit. If you click this little button here, this is showing you this stuff. So the whole idea is this element will never change, essentially, or it will never change its what they call hash code. When you create an element, it has this really long number that tells ORD like this is a unique element. So the whole thing we're trying to do is make sure that we keep this element, this unique element, available at all times, essentially. Even if we come in here and modify the complex terrain model, if I come in here and add another terrain model, let's say maybe that survey was real and they gave us a little extra piece here, I could reference that in and it would show up here, and I could append that to my complex terrain model. And then I would have that additional area. Another thing to note, once that happens, now you do have two terrain models in your complex terrain model. You could go ahead and delete that dummy terrain model, because the only reason we have that dummy terrain model is so that we could create this complex terrain model in the first place. It's really not doing anything other than that. So that's kind of the whole idea behind creating this complex terrain model, is so that we have the opportunity to add things to it on the fly in the future without modifying or removing the element. And so that's pretty much the end of this video. We've basically shown how to get a SURVRD from the surveyor and unpack it into all of the 2D files, the TOPORD, the DREXRD, and the UTEXRD files, as well as take either the XML that was delivered from the surveyor and bring that in and create a complex terrain model, or export the XML from the SURVRD itself and work that way. So thanks for watching. Hope you guys learned a few things about all of this stuff, and you can start applying this to your next projects. Thanks.